Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. So I'm going to do three things in this video here. Number one, I'm going to show off the new blue model of the Miyoo Mini. And then we're also going to see what we can do about fixing some of the light bleeding on the transparent models. And then finally, I picked up a couple new cases for the Miyoo Mini that I think you might be interested in. And so we'll show those off at the end of the video as well. So kind of a jam-packed video, but I'll try to keep it short. First, here is the blue Miyoo Mini. This thing is pretty cool looking. My first impression is that it is way more transparent than the black version. And it has kind of a really fun characterization to it. It's supposed to be reminiscent, I think, of a Nintendo 64. Either way, everything else about this device seems to be exactly the same. It has the exact same components, only the shell is different. So let's add the SD card that came with the device and see if there are any changes internally. And so by going into the settings menu and then picking device info, we can see the firmware version that's loaded on the internal storage. And as you can see here, it is still the January version. Some people have been getting the April versions, but I did not. If you have the April version, then you're good to go. You don't need to install any extra firmware, and you can load it up with Onion OS or Mini UI or whatever else. If you want to have Onion OS with a device like this with a January firmware, you'll have to use one of my guides to update the internal firmware. And I'll leave a link to that in the video description. Now, the only other thing I noticed that's unique about this one, besides obviously the blue color of the device itself, is that the light bleed on this seems to be much worse than the black transparent version. And the black transparent one was pretty bad, but this one is quite a bit worse. So here we are in a dark environment, and man, this thing is like a flashlight. And me personally, I found that this is one of my favorite devices to use while playing in bed. And so this amount of light bleed to me needs to be addressed, and that's what we're going to do here in this video. But before we get into that, let's do a quick comparison of all the other devices stacked up against this one. First, we have the gray model here. This one kind of has that smoky cigarette look to it like an NES. Next is the white version. This one's running Onion OS, and it has those nice colored buttons from the European version of Super Nintendo or the Super Famicom. Next, we have the black transparent one with those same colored buttons, but this one is running Mini UI. And finally, we have the blue one. Now, one extra note here is the devices on the right have a black D-pad as well as start and select buttons. I gotta say, each of these have their own unique kind of style to them, and I like them all for different reasons. And it might be a little bit hard to tell in the light like this, but I think it's kind of apparent that the transparent blue one does have a lot more light bleed than even the transparent black one. But either way, I actually want to fix the light bleed on both of them. So let's actually jump into that part of the video next. And to do this, all you're really going to need is to have a small Phillips head screwdriver and then some electrical tape. After you take out the 4 screws along the corners here, there are 2 more underneath the battery inside the case. After that, you can unplug the battery, and then the case will come right apart. There are no clips or anything. And so this is what we have to work with here. Now, in order to properly tape up those LED lights, we are going to need to remove this board from the device. And it's a little bit tricky, but not too bad. First thing, you're going to want to remove this protective tape that's over the display ribbon cable. I recommend using some tweezers to pull it up and then use your fingers to pull it the rest of the way off. And definitely be gentle during this process. You don't want to mess up that display cable. From there, just flip up that little switch behind the cable and then you can pull it right out. Now, when you remove the board, make sure you take it from the left side because that volume wheel is on the right side and it can mess things up if you try to pull it from that side instead. Either way, the board should just come right out. The little rubber membranes may stick to the board or they may be stuck to the buttons. It's fine either way. Don't worry about those. We'll put those together later. Now, you're going to want to cut off a small piece of electrical tape, and then you're going to want to cover the top part here within the center because those 3 LEDs are the LEDs we want to mask. And you can actually make this tape kind of long. You can cover up the wires from the rumble motor if you'd like. I would actually recommend making it longer than usual because the light will still bleed out of this tape. I also found that the best thing to do is to take a second piece of tape and then lay it horizontally across the front of the board here. That's going to help with even more light bleed. I actually didn't do this on my blue version and it came out somewhat bright because I didn't do it. And I'll show you kind of how that looked afterwards. Either way, that's my recommendation. One longer piece across the back and then a small thin one across the front as well. And really, that's actually about all we have to do. We're done at this point. So we're going to take those rubber membranes, make sure they're covering each of the buttons. They have these little guideposts you can slot the rubber membranes onto, so there's no way to really mess this up. And then after that, the next step is really just to add the board. The most important thing to do here is make sure that you put that volume wheel in first and then angle it down from the left. Next, all you have to do is add the ribbon cable. I didn't do a very good job of filming it, but you just kind of push it right in. It fits perfectly. Then you can use that little clamp to secure it into place, and then take that protective tape and put it back on. And that was it. It was pretty easy, right? I'm sure there was no reason to get worried about it. Either way, all you have to do now is put on the case, and then I recommend putting on those 2 internal screws first, and then do the 4 along the outside. Double check to make sure all your buttons are in place and you're good to go, and then plug the battery back in. It can only go in one way, so you really can't mess it up. Now when you put the battery back in, make sure you're not too tight with that cable. You just want to kind of loosely rest it on top. And that's it. Add the battery cover, put the SD card back in, and we are ready to rock. So I also taped up the blue one like I mentioned before, but I did that off camera when I was still kind of testing how to do this process. And so when you're in bright light like here at my desk, you can still see a little bit of light bleeding with the blue one, but the black one is mostly gone. And then I also have the other black one, which I had not taped up at this point. So you're going to get an idea of what it's like without any tape, with half of the tape, and then with the full tape that we did here in this video. We'll start with the one that hasn't been taped at all. So this is what the black light bleed looks like. And as you can see, it's pretty obnoxious. Next is the blue one. This one has one piece of tape across it. And as you can see, the light bleed is a lot better than it was, but it's still kind of there. And so yeah, I think with this process, you've got quite a few options here. You can just kind of deal with the light bleed with not putting any tape on it, or you could put one piece of tape on it like the blue one and get a little bit of a nicer, more pleasant light bleed here. Or you can do the full Monty and put two pieces down and have even more muted light bleed. Okay, so now let's transition over to those cases. When I first got my Miyoo Mini, I was using this fake leather one here, and this is made for playing cards. And after about 6 months of wear and tear, as you can see here, it is getting kind of beat up. The other problem with this one is that it's sold out across Amazon, so it's kind of hard to actually find this one now. But someone in the community tipped me off to other options that we have available. And so I purchased a couple of them, and they just arrived the other day, and so I wanted to kind of smash that together with this video here. Now, believe it or not, these cards are specifically made for people who are like into like card game tricks. And so I bought mine from like a magic website. And I think it's kind of cool. Actually, it came with like a newsletter and everything. Either way, this is what these cases look like. And they've been selling like hotcakes as well. And so there are 4 different colors that are supposed to be available, but the only 2 that were available at the time of my purchase were blue and red. In hindsight, I think I actually like these colors better than the black and brown versions that were sold out at the time. Now these are kind of unique. They have a side clasp to them here. And honestly, they look a little bit blocky, but they're also kind of sharp looking too. Let's do a quick comparison against the actual Miyoo Mini case that comes with the device. As you can see, the Miyoo Mini case is quite a bit thicker, and it has that somewhat obnoxious zipper all around the sides of it. But of course, the Miyoo Mini one can hold things like SD cards and cables and things like that. One thing I kind of considered with this is to maybe put the device in upside down. That way the entire screen is fully protected, because there is a little bit of a gap between the cover and the bottom. Another nice touch is it has this M on here on the side, and that's from the name of the company, which is Maze. Either way, yeah, I think these do look pretty neat. I'm still torn on whether or not to put them in upside down or right side up, but I think regardless, these will be nice little protectors for your device, and they're not so thick. And let's be honest here, these things look like they came out of like 1976, and I like the fact that they have like this 70s vibe to them. I think the red and blue colors really help with that detail as well. And these are pretty cheap. I think I got them for like $10 or $12 each, and they feel pretty well made. I think the clasp on the side is actually pretty good. I also love the fact that when you see something like this, your first thought is not, hey, is that a tiny little retro console that can play 1,000 games? Instead, you're like, why are you walking around with a pack of Uno cards? So in that sense, I think it's pretty cool. Alright, so wrapping things up here, we now have 4 different models of the Miyoo Mini. It's getting ridiculous at this point, and I've heard they have more on the way. Now, one thing you may be wondering, now that I've been messing around with the Miyoo Mini for several months at this point, which ones are my favorite? Well, honestly, it's kind of hard to say. You know, the gray one here does have a retro vibe to it, and it does remind me of an old NES. And while the transparent blue one does look the funnest, I don't think that one actually resonates with me the most. And part of that may be the fact that I never owned a Nintendo 64 in my teenage years. Now the white one to me looks really nice and clean, and it makes those colors pop. And it's a similar story with the black transparent one as well. And so in the end, yeah, I actually like the white and the black ones the most. And it's funny because I like them for 2 different reasons. The white one looks super clean to me, while the black one has a more machine-like quality to it by virtue of being partially transparent. One thing I have been thinking about is trying to get extra black buttons like the ones here on the retro version, and then doing a total blackout here on the black transparent one. I think it might actually look pretty cool to have a completely black device. So that might be something that I try here in the future. Either way, I'm super happy with all these Miyoo Minis, but I think the white and the black transparent ones are my favorite right now. Of course, I reserve the right to change my mind at any time, especially when those new ones come out. Either way, thanks for watching this video. I hope it was helpful for you, and if you have not bought a Miyoo Mini yet, I'd love to know in the comments why you haven't bit the bullet. At $60, these things are just kind of amazing. I mean, sure, they are definitely small and not the most ergonomic things in the world, but the pocketability of them just wins me over hands down. As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.